Mike's on. Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals for May 18, 2015. We'll begin with the special order calendar. Decision items. Item number 1, 17279 BZ, 16704 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, they provided the updated drawings of the signs, sign calculations and parking, showing that the signs do comply with the C1 regulations, which will leave to the Department of Buildings to confirm. The plans show the parking for disabled. I'm not really clear what happened to replacing the missing planting and the cheap plastic chain. That was something we had asked them to. But there is a letter from the nearby church stating that they have a key to the lock, but there's no photos showing the updates on the site. We could just make this conditional to the approval, I think, so we can move on with this. So I'm okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, as long as it's conditional.
Yeah. Okay.
To clarify, Madam Chair, that replace the chain with a heavy-duty chain?
Yeah, and then they were supposed to have
comply
changed
with
the
the plantings.
planting.
Okay.
Right.
Thank
But
you.
they did show the disabled parking space, so. Okay.
New cases. Item number 2, 17404 BZ, 254 West 24th Street, Manhattan.
And they asked to, the applicant asked to adjourn this to June 23rd.
Appeals calendar. Item number 3, 300-08A, 3935 27th Street, Queens.
27th Street, okay. Don't we have a decision item also there?
Yeah, 95-14A.
What am I
Fourteen.
missing?
The decision.
Yeah, we have a decision item.
Oh,
95-14 through 37.
I'm sorry, yeah, I'm losing my old, I'm using
Yeah,
the
that's-
wrong one, that's why.
Okay. I had the same
Okay,
issue.
it's Monday. Sorry. Decision item number 3, 9514A, 237 East 72nd Street, Manhattan.
Okay, this one, they did submit the requested plan modifications. We have another couple of notes we'd like added to the drawings, but I'm sure the applicant can handle that today, in which case I think we're fine with it. Yeah.
Continued hearing items. Item number 4, 300-08A, 3935 27th Street, Queens.
Okay, this one, the saga continues big time. They've now, in addition to firing their construction manager, they've also fired their general contractor. So now there's no one on the site, and no one who's trying to take care of the safety issues and so on. Doesn't seem to be an end in sight to this disaster.
The construction manager, they just hired? They fired?
The one that came before us, yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Capital One, yeah, he's gone.
No, Capital One is construction.
I'm sorry, the
The
guy.
man who
Oh, I didn't
appeared
hear
here, who was so on top of it and so
Did the
on.
safety plan and everything?
Yes,
sorry,
so
that-
the site safety group is still involved, but there's no sort of person managing them. So what he was taking on much more than just site safety. They were handling the netting and the protection, right? But he was taking on the condition of the building and working with the neighbors to put things right and so on. And coordinating with everybody, and has a good reputation at DOB, so was working with them. And so now it seems like it's back to zero. So my feeling about this is, there's a stop work order, so that's very expensive, right? Maybe makes the project something you just want to sell. So I think maybe we take this off the calendar, and they have to demonstrate, for them to come back, all the violations have to have been cured, the site has to have been secured, the work in place has to be safe, as established by a site safety inspector, and obviously all the work meets code, so we were concerned about construction quality and so on. We were even worried about sampling, core samples and so on, which we never really got a satisfactory answer on. We know the electrical was defective. And also that the neighbors and their properties have been made whole. So like, don't bother coming back until all of those things have occurred. Anybody else want to add to that lovely list?
Works for me.
Item number 5, 27813A, 121 Varick Street, Manhattan.
Okay, so this is the amazing sign story. So there were a lot of kind of new submissions. So the appellant is making an argument that the DOB's argument that you can use the word includes from the statutory construction of section 12-10 doesn't actually apply here, but I didn't see them connect the dots on that argument. I didn't understand why in section 4253 the which are shown on the master plan is not a specified example. So if they could take us there further, that would be helpful. They also argued that you can't import the word approaches from the master plan into section 4253 and then apply to it the more expansive view of approaches as permitted under 1210. I don't really know that that was what DOB is doing, so I'd like them to take that out of there. They're saying that the text is unambiguous. My feeling about it is if it's so unambiguous, what are we doing here? Then there were other arguments that we've heard before about Rule 49 and conjunctive analysis, that it needs to be both on the master plan and designated by CPC. So let's see. And there was a comment about taking judicial notice of the traffic rules, which are a completely different section. And I understand the concept of judicial notice, but I don't see how that applies to importing a defined term. That's agreeing that there's regulations that go on elsewhere and that those regulations apply if relevant, but I don't see how they're relevant here. It's a term from a completely different text written at a different time. But with respect to the visibility of the sign from the cut area, from that open cut, the applicant seems to be conceding that it's visible, and it seems to be depending on who does the math, really, how you measure. So I'd like, first of all, to hear from DOB about how, I know there's a TPPN that slightly postdates the installation of this sign, but I'd like to hear from DOB about its prior operations before the TPPN, because we know that most of the time the TPPNs result as a result of long-standing practice. It's finally that you're articulating in a memorandum, so everyone is on the same page. So I would like to hear about that, but it seems as if even if you measured it the way the applicant is measuring it, you still have a problem, because even if it's 207 feet away from the arterial there, then that would mean it's a 207 square foot sign, which is a lot bigger than, a lot smaller than what was installed. With respect to the DOB submission, the DOB brings up a new argument that the sign was installed at a different height than what was originally permitted. I'd like, first of all, the DOB to explain what its policy is with respect to variations from permits, because a minor variation from a permit seems to me would, and therefore rendering the permit invalid, seems to me would wreak real havoc. So at what point does a variation from a permit not equal a permit, I mean, equal an invalid permit? I'd like the appellant to respond to the DOB's comment that this sign is at a different height and so on, because we don't have information about the sign that they're claiming they had the right to. We only have information that DOB provided, a photograph of it installed around then based on sort of Google images, and then the materials that were apparently the permit materials, but we don't know what the appellant actually believes is the height and location and size of the sign. And what else? I think that's about it. Did anybody have any other comments?
Well, I'm of the opinion that the entire plaza there is part of the approach, not just the restricted entry. You know, historically, it looked like that's where the toll booths were. That's, you know, from the time the tunnel was opened, that was used as an approach plaza. And to me, it's no stretch of the imagination to include that in approach. And the CPC designation list does say Holland Tunnel and approaches, and I would just be hard put to say, well, if that's not an approach, what is? So.
Any other comments?
I mean, I've said this before, I agree with what Commissioner Montanez says about approach, but I also agree with you that the text is not clear. I mean, I think the text sets up a contradiction in saying that it has to be both on the master plan and designated by CPC on the list, and Holland Tunnel and approaches is listed on the list, yet it's not on the plan at all, and that's unclear.
Well,
So, I mean,
just to clarify, the Holland Tunnel itself is very much on the
no,
master
I mean,
plan.
I meant the approaches.
Yeah,
And
right.
so that right there sets up a situation for where we need to interpret and go a step further than just the clarity of the written word.
I wanted to just add one other thing. Regarding the master plan, it's not drawn to a scale that would allow specific designation of all approaches.
Right.
It's not drawn to that scale. It's not possible.
Right. But I actually believe that as long as the arterial or the toll crossing is shown on the master plan, check, you get to check. And when the CPC designated, it designated both the arterial toll crossings bridges or toll crossings, and that it adds approaches is its determination to kind of expand on what that is, but that's part of the designation. So we wish that they had simply given us a little more direction there, in fact, a lot more direction. But, okay, did you want to add anything?
I would just note that what you just explained is applicable to many other arterial highways throughout the city, that this, as Commissioner Montanez noted, the master plan is so macroscopic in nature that it can't possibly encompass everything that's been designated. And the CPC report is the first point, and then you look at the map, you look at the master plan, you look at the text, and you come up with and you think about the intent of these regulations, and you arrive at a reasonable and rational regulatory scheme. I think that's what DOB is trying to do. I think that's what this board is trying to do, and I think we're almost there.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 6, 11-14A through 1414A, 4704, 4706, 4708, 198th Street, Queens. They've asked to take this off.
Off the calendar, yes.
New cases, item number 7, 230-14A, 20 Pelton Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay, this one, I didn't really have too many issues with this, but I just do have to say, and we do have DOT, DOB, and fire department sign-offs. I just note that the statement of facts states again that bulk waivers are requested. It's kind of like waive everything just in case. And I know that was maybe prior practice, but I don't really understand the idea of waive everything just in case, because it's awfully broad, and and we're not reviewing the waive everything. And actually, the zoning calculation sheet shows the entire project's in compliance, so what would we be waiving? I think the applicant should clarify that, and if there's no need to waive, don't waive, don't ask.
I was curious if they had received a revised BPP because they're modifying the sidewalks and such in certain places.
Yeah. If they've submitted that, or
Right.
maybe to...
If they received a revised builder's pavement plan, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Received prepared the
Prepared
revised.
one.
Oh, prepared.
Received
Oh.
approval.
Oh.
Because they don't really show how the sidewalk actually lines up, I guess, on Pelton Avenue there. It sort of leaves off at their property, and you don't get a sense of how they're actually going to connect. Because I think Pelton Avenue gets narrower at a particular point. So I'd like to see how they're going to align the sidewalk.
Okay.
And I guess one of the major sticking points of this site plan is that they're required to have they have 3 front yards and they have 1 side yard, and that side yard has to be 20 feet wide, which is what makes it
Right.
stick out so far.
Right.
Right.
That, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I was looking at, why did they decide
Why
to
didn't they
cite it
move it in
there?
a little bit
Right,
more, like 8 feet,
But-
but they have to.
right. That might be a waiver. No, maybe we can't do that. Okay. Okay.
Zoning calendar, decision items, item number 8, 301 13BZ, 1502 Avenue N, Brooklyn.
Okay. We're going to defer this. There was some more materials that needed to be submitted.
Item number 9, 309 13BZ, 965 East 24th Street, Brooklyn.
They revised as requested, the statement of facts concerning the bay window being a permitted obstruction, and provided dimensions at the rear yard, measuring from the rear lot line to the attic wall, which is what we wanted. So I think they've done everything we asked for, so.
Item number 10, 146 14BZ, 285 Grand Street, Manhattan.
Okay, sorry. They submitted a letter describing the sound attenuation measures that are proposed for the weight drops. But on the drawings, it just says they'll use
Mats.
mats, so,
Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
very specific.
no,
They
and
should
so,
add
yeah.
that, yeah.
So I think what they should do is have on the drawings themselves the specific number and types of platforms, so they can have it as an alternate. They can have either this type or that type, which is the specs that they showed us, but they have to spec it. It can't just say platforms, right? And a statement on the drawings that will also have in the resolution that no weightlifting is to be done without a platform in place, without the weightlifting being on the platform. They also requested a longer term, and I appreciate the existing use, and there's this noisy restaurant above, so the restaurant is not kind of a sensitive receptor, but the museum next door definitely is, and it's not done yet. So that's why they need to be kind of put on a temporary approval, 2 years, and then after that, I think we can look at a longer term, if
Well, it would be
everything's
2
okay.
years from now,
Yeah.
because usually we do it 2 years from when they opened,
Oh,
but they've already been open a year.
yeah.
So maybe it should be, 3 years from when they opened.
Okay, that's fine, to be more consistent with method. Okay, that's fine. So 3 years from when they opened, opening. It's just, by then, I assume the museum will have installed everything, they'll understand if there's any kind of vibration, and they kept talking about their 1-inch seismic separation. It's like, I look at those 1-inch things, it's like, that's where all the rubble falls while you're building, and there's no more 1-inch anything.
Where the contractor said, who has to
who has
leave
to
this
leave it
empty?
in?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just pour concrete to that.
Right, they don't know what it's for, right? Okay. So we do need quickly the drawings to be revised, okay.
Item number 11, 18614BZ, 5163 Bond Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. At our request, sorry, let me go down there. Okay, at our request, they did correct the concrete and excavation quantities required for the unencumbered site and the delta between the proposed and the unencumbered, and they reflected this also on the financial analysis as we requested, so thank you. They did provide site elevations, which we have not seen before. I would like to condition approval on the blank surfaces that are at the second and fourth floors towards the rear of it, that they be treated in a manner that will present an appealing facade to the surrounding community, because as rendered, these portions of the facade are really bleak. It's kind of, no one's looking this way, let's just ignore this facade. But a building is 3D, you have to design all four sides of it. So that, I think, needs to be, and then I'm not sure how we handle this. There was so on March 15th, LPC had an archaeological significance report, which listed that the lots on which the project is located have the potential of finding remains of 19th century occupancy. The last EAS predated that report, so they didn't respond to that. There was a comment in the EAS that said, we don't think there's anything there because there's a subway. And so maybe when the subway was being excavated, it affected the rest of the site. And if LPC is okay with that, then we don't need a restrictive deck or anything.
Get a letter.
I thought they were going to.
We didn't get the letter yet. Oh, you have it?
We have one.
Oh, you do? I haven't seen it. Okay, you have a restrictive deck? Okay, oh, I didn't understand that. Okay. It wasn't submitted in the...
I wonder if it didn't make it to SharePoint?
It didn't make it to SharePoint, I didn't see. Okay, I'm sorry, somebody should have stopped me before. Okay, so there's a restrictive deck on archaeological survey. Okay. So then I think they responded to everything. Okay. Anybody else?
Item number 12, 28914BZ, 223236 31st Street, Queens.
Okay, they did revise the plans to clarify the dimensions and the vegetation, and they provided better photos of the installed plantings, so I guess we're ready to go.
Okay. Continued hearing items, item number 13, 34312BZ, 570 East 21st Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, just one second. Okay. So, at long last on this, they submitted, I thought, what was quite a good programmatic needs analysis. It was very clear. It describes the function and the need for each room, goes room by room by room, why they need it, why it has to be located where it is, how many students would be in it. They also included a prospective schedule of room use. And I think that it's clear from this that the applicant has carefully considered the operation of this very unusual educational facility type and accounted for the needs of these particularly fragile students. And I'm, okay, anybody?
Yeah, I mean,
I just didn't, we had asked them for a revised site plan with all the plantings, planting detail. I don't think they ever gave that to us.
Planting, okay. Josh, do you know? No? So maybe they could, can you reach out to them today, and that's something they could do it fast.
Applicants in the audience.
Yeah.
We'll
Okay.
have one final submission anyway, right?
Right, okay, it's true, we didn't close on this yet, okay. Did you want to say something?
yeah, I just wanted to say that from the information that we were given, it was clear to me that this was a school. It was primarily functioning in an educational capacity. I thought they did a good job as well.
Great, thanks. Okay.
Item number 14, 350-12BZ, 532nd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, the applicant requested that we take this off calendar. This one.
Item number 15, 155-13BZ, 1782-1784, East 28th Street, Brooklyn.
Yes, this is your,
Oh, okay.
this is the rabbi's residence,
yes.
and I never heard this.
So the applicant submitted to us new drawings and the new facts and findings. I just had a couple of questions. It looks like the new sort of women's area may open up into the men's area as well, and I'm wondering if they calculated their occupancy on sort of that total space, because I guess the women's area is not counted as a public assembly, and I'm wondering if actually it should. Let's see, what else did I have here? Show the new, the applicant gave us the existing plans in a previous submission, but I think it would be helpful if when you're submitting new revised, new plans, that you give us like a total set so that we're not constantly kind of looking backwards to find the existing, because it becomes sort of, painful to keep going back month after month to actually try and find that. Let's see, what else did I have? Oh, and that there were some inconsistencies, I think, in the facts and findings with the new drawings. So I think the applicant just needs to go back and make sure that they've included in the facts and findings everything that they put into the drawings. Commissioner Otley-Brown?
Well, especially with respect to the apartments that are going to be functioning as, I guess, rabbi/caretaker apartments, they need to, first of all, accept a condition in the resolution restricting it to that use group for use, but they should also then go back to the facts and findings and talk about why those need to be on site, because they don't address that programmatically. And usually in other cases where we do have those apartments on site, there's usually some link to the program, like the rabbi is available late at night for, different meetings, and that's why he needs to be on site. There's nothing in the statement regarding why it has to be here.
And they've expanded, really, that residential component. Right now that they have the new sort of section, they've expanded it. Now it's a much larger rabbi's apartment. So I think they need to talk about that. Okay.
Oh, so it's a senior and a junior rabbi, still in all should be in the facts and findings, an explanation as to why they have to be located on site, both of them.
Right. And I also think it was a little ambiguous. Well, perhaps they should just reword a little bit in the facts and findings about this being, as you said, use group 4, and that this is integral, the residential portion is integral to sort of the functioning of the
Right,
of the
because
facility.
right
It
now
doesn't
there's
really
one
cover that.
sentence.
Yeah, and it just,
There's a
you're supposed to
rabbi's
assume
apartment upstairs,
that
that's like
that
the
it-
sentence.
Commissioner?
Well, I agree with the residential layout was very confusing, and the first floor layout, which is, I guess, residential for the rabbi, was very confusing, and in the statement it said there were going to be 3 apartments. It looks like 2 apartments, but it's not really clear who was, there was no statement regarding who was going to live there. And I also had a question about the excavation in the rear yard on the cellar and the basement level. It seems that now with the addition of the 3rd home, it's almost like superfluous space. I mean, they can fit their entire congregation without that excavation in the rear yard, including creating a multi-purpose room in the cellar, if they could explain why that's necessary.
Also, I had some questions about that rear portion and exiting, whether or not they had sufficient exit capacity for the amount of people. Because if it's simultaneously used, let's say the cellar and that first level there, that you've got, was it 70 plus 70 would be 140 people trying to get out of really one exit. They have a second one, but it's, I think most people are going to be racing towards the front there, and I'm wondering if that actually works.
Oh, we had asked them to look at landscaping the northern side yard as a buffer against the additional residential they did not address that.
Right. Anything else?
That's it.
Item number 16, 4414 BZ, 92 Lake Street, Manhattan.
Sorry, so they provided copies of approved plans for 1996 and 97 modifications, and also 1992. They've amended their proposed operations of the school to provide now for educating only 2 to 5-year-olds. Now that it's...
We're on
Oh,
BCE.
I'm sorry, we're on Lake Street. Sorry.
4414.
44.
Live well.
Oh, it's Livewell. Yeah, that would not be relevant to what Livewell is happening on. Okay, yeah. So, sorry.
Fit 2-year-olds.
So with this one, I just need some clarification from counsel who was working on a substantial compliance letter. Maybe, do you know the answer already?
Becca and I will discuss that as soon as we get back.
Okay.
And to the extent that there's some problem, we'll coordinate with the applicant. We think it's in substantial compliance.
Okay. Because we just received sort of into this substantial compliance letter from 2003. Meanwhile, the applicant had submitted a request for a substantial compliance letter, and that was in process. So it had to do with this through block connection that got broken by what we thought was this proposal, but maybe not. Okay, sorry about the confusion.
Scared me.
There's a word confused here on my notes.
Okay, item number 17, 60-14 BZ, 14141,
Okay, sorry.
72nd Avenue, Queens.
Let's start over. Okay. So now, they did provide copies of approved plans for 1996 and 97, and also for 92 when they made the initial conversion. They amended the proposed operations of the school now to provide only for 2 to 5-year-olds. Now that we're in the daycare center world, it seems like we need Department of Health review, which is our standard operation now because they actually know what's necessary for these kids. They've amended the plans to show the sanctuary and 2 classrooms and nicely adjacent to a refrigerated trash storage in the cellar, but at least there is refrigerated trash storage, and classrooms on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floors, and a rooftop play area, which is great because the kids were playing in the alley and kind of creating problems with the neighbors. They also modified the drawings to show the 3rd floor setback 17 foot 6 inches from the rear lot line, which is something we asked them to look at. And they proposed a new elevator to be installed in front of the building where it belongs, next to the entrance, or as part of the entrance. The statement of facts, though, has a disconnect between the as-of-right hardship and the proposed, stating that the as-of-right would reduce the sanctuary capacity from 104 to 74 congregants, while this proposed only has 81 congregants. So I'm not sure that that creates any kind of a hardship. I'm not sure what that is. So based on the revised plans, it seems the application is now entirely for a daycare center and not particularly for a synagogue, which is what's just in the cellar, which isn't actually within our domain of waivers, since it's not floor area. The entirety of the building is programmed for childcare use. So my first reaction to that is, as we know from all these daycare centers, daycare is now being mixed with adult worship, which is not allowed. Can't have adults and children passing by each other in a daycare center. And I'm not sure whether there's a waiver for this. I don't know why there should be, because adults are strangers to the little kids. The statement of fact states there are 65 2 to 5-year-olds currently, but the classroom space is for 162 students, which is nearly a 2.5 time increase. I don't think the statement of facts provides adequate support for the need for this level of increase. Usually we see like a 5-year projection. We don't see a 20-year projection. So I think already they haven't made their case for the need. It seems like it's an extremely small population that uses this place. They state that that's the other thing that's so strange. They state that we checked our records and actually the basement is a cellar. But the 1992 drawings actually show what a real cellar looks like. That means slab on grade, more or less. And in that case, in 92, it was slab on grade, or it said first floor on grade, and then a real deep cellar. And, you know, we could say this is a DOB call, but it's a 13-foot high space that is 4 foot 6 inches below the base plane. And then they drop this sort of mechanical ductwork thing. And they're, I guess, saying that that's part of the first floor. I'm not really sure what they're saying. So I kind of think that's a DOB call about whether this is a cellar or a first floor, if it's or a basement, in which case, if it's a basement, obviously it's floor area. So, which I think it's what it's been throughout. The approved plans from 1997 are very confusing. Like, how could they have actually been approved? It's more likely they were self-certified, which isn't the same thing. You can get just about anything perforated, since no one's looking except the architect, whose license is supposed to be on the line. But there's no required rear yard provided, and also the side yards were reduced to 6 foot 6. I do understand that this was an extension on an existing house, and the house had these shallow side yards, but that doesn't entitle you to continue the non-compliance, so how in the world did that happen?
And the front
In the
yard.
front yard.
And the front yard.
That's crazy.
Yeah, not to mention an elevator and stairs in the required side yards, which are not permitted obstructions.
And the dimensions are totally unclear from 92 to 97 to now. They're all different. I mean, the 92 building doesn't resemble anything of what they say the existing building was in 97. And it's, I mean, you're off by a lot, not just a lot, just like, a couple of feet. You're off by 15 feet. So I had real questions about exactly what was built and what we're looking at now. The dimensions totally off.
And just to pick up on that, so you have a new architect/engineer who's assuming responsibility for this application with a letter, for instance, that says, I'm okay with adding floors to this building. So I just have to say, now the architect's really, really responsible for this project. So all the materials that are submitted to us have to be accurately reflect the existing conditions, the illegal conditions, and the proposed conditions. That's the risk of taking on responsibility. It has to be done properly. So yeah, it's certainly not legalization, or it's certainly not working with complying side yards. All of this is a legalization, more or less. So, and that needs to be made clear. With respect to neighborhood character, the applicant or the statement of facts relies on the height of other community facility buildings that tend to be larger than adjoining residential buildings. And I kind of understand that argument, and there were a lot of other examples, because it's not enormously bigger, it's somewhat bigger. And it's true that historically, buildings that service a community are grander and so on. And the front facade of the building kind of has that grandish-ish look to it, but the rear, that is what all of the neighbors are going to be seeing, is a neglected terribleness. So, and they're going to be adding a floor to this, which will increase the degree of neglected terribleness. So I would consider that a blight on the neighborhood, not something consistent with neighborhood character. So there better be some design that goes into improving the look for the benefit of the community, in particular from the sides and rear. Then, with respect to the violations, There are 15 open ECB and 3 open DOB violations, which the statement says were all paid, but actually one of them is still open for $2,500. Most of the violations are for occupancy without a C of O or work without a permit or contrary to plans. The work without a permit and the contrary to plans makes me nervous because that seems to be behavior on the part of the applicant, which is not acceptable. But I'm actually most concerned about the occupancy absent a fire alarm. I also don't know if there's a sprinkler system in here, which there has to be. We need to hear about that. And also, there was a violation for lack of a public assembly permit. So those things need to be cleared up. We can work with the DOB to get that stuff cleared up in advance. I just, again, don't have a lot of faith in this applicant to do anything once they're given the go-ahead. So it's kind of policing from the front. Also, I'm not sure exactly whether this is okay. I'd like the fire department to comment on this, but there were a lot of complaints from neighbors about trash buildup on the side yards and rear and about children playing in the yards. And it seems to me that now that there's a rooftop play area, that the side yards could be fenced off with a gate. And maybe there's something about how the fire department has access to those gates, like if it's something where it's just like a crash gate or they have a key or I don't know what it is, but we would ask fire department to comment on that. Anybody else on this?
Well, I echo everything that you've said. I just really had a problem with the 1992, 1997 drawings and what they're proposing. It's very unclear to me exactly what this building looks like at this particular moment in time compared to what they're asking for. And I just want to echo what you've said about the architect taking over this job. He gave us sort of a cut and paste letter that, to me at least, indicated that it was in answer to someone else's query on another job somewhere else. And I would just caution the architect that if you're going to take over someone else's job, and you can clearly see that there are vast inconsistencies between 3 sets of plans that you hope get through the DOB or that did get through the DOB. You really take a look at that and you write specifically about the inconsistencies, how you feel that they can be addressed and cured either through BSA approvals or however they intend to do it. But I think you have to demonstrate that you understand what's going on with the project and not just simply say, well, we feel that we can fix this. It's really just not enough. And there are enough inconsistencies that would make me as a registered architect, I would feel uncomfortable and really want to make sure that I was seeing all of the issues before I would even write a letter and stamp it. So,
Yes,
Mike.
sure.
I had questions about their programmatic changes that they've made. For instance, they had talked about previously the synagogue was going to accommodate 200 people per day and 300 per weekend based on classes as well as the worship. But now it's down to 81, and it doesn't really, the statement doesn't really account for the changes and what's going to happen to ensure that this space is not going to be overused and there aren't going to be adults mingling with young people all throughout the building. I also had a question, as you did, about the growth of the synagogue, because it does now say it's 162 children, but it doesn't really say how many years it's going to take until they expand to 162. They now have a rooftop play area, but they're not really talking about what the maximum capacity of children will be on the roof and the effect that that's going to have on the neighbors and whether or not they're going to have some sort of sound attenuation on that roof to protect the neighbor that's adjacent to it. Also, as for the impact of the arrival and departure on the community, they say that they anticipate no more than 3 cars at a time based on the existing population and that they would be easily accommodated in front of the school. But what's going to happen when the population triples? How many more people will be coming at a particular time? And what will they do with the spillover of cars that are arriving?
Great, yes.
I think I'm sort of repeating some things, but again, they say they currently have 65 students, yet they're asking for 162 seats, and they didn't really explain how they were going to get there. And at that rate, I mean, it would take a decade to get to the number of children, because they started out at 50 a couple of years ago. So I also question whether they would be permitted rooftop play above the level of the third floor. But if the DOH is going to look at that, that's something I hope they will review. And I still feel uncomfortable with this front yard incursion, which at some point was illegal. And I really feel if they're going to do any new construction, it should be within the required, they should provide a required front yard.
So, but there's already the incursion, so,
Right, but I feel that the mass of the building will look less from the street if they provide
they
a
set back. In other words, set back from both front and rear.
Right, and then
Okay.
if the third floor rooftop play area doesn't look really feasible, and if they don't really need the 162 seats, they can provide play areas on the third floor at the front and the back.
Oh, that's a good idea, okay. And, one thing I might say is, they talk about some classes during the day for adults, and then otherwise classes in the evening, which would be after the day school, right? So, but I'm thinking, during the day, you can't have adults on the same floor with the kids. So maybe then the cellar is the adult floor, and the upper floors are for the kids. And then you can have, I'm not sure how you regulate the entrance or how DOH deals with that, but at least they're not on the same floor when they're
And then as
occupying.
far as the children playing outside, last time they mentioned they were going to start a Sabbath supervised child play for, to have classes while the parents were in synagogue, and I just wanted to know how that was going.
Oh, that they were going to implement it already.
Right.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Item number 18, 6414 BZ, 1320 East 23rd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. So the last submission on this application was prior to the December 9th hearing. So this last submission was November 19th. I listened to the video because I couldn't remember anything about what we had discussed. And at the 12/9 hearing, there was no additional discussion of the application, and the architect was not present. So the last comments on the application were those provided at the review session. According to that, the submitted materials for this hearing should have responded to the comments at the review session and didn't. Instead, there is more argument submitted about the percentage of smaller rear yards on the block, and no response to the comments that there isn't support to reduce the rear yard to 20 feet from its existing non-complying 24 feet, except at the first floor. The plan should have reflected that. Also, we needed proof that the existing non-compliance is legal. All that was stated in the review session. With respect to the massing, the only discernible difference that I found, and I really scoured the two sets of drawings, was the dormer on the north elevation was turned into 2 instead of 1 on the attic. And the house remains massive compared to its neighbors. There were a lot of comments about the massing, bringing down the roof line or approaching the roof line in a different way that's more consistent with the neighborhood sort of vocabulary. I actually understand what was going on here with this submission because there have been 4 adjournments on this. And our comments at the last hearing,
Sorry, I'm getting confused, but didn't we had a submission on April 30th? for this?
Yeah, we did. We had a
Oh, okay.
submission.
All
I'm
right.
responding to the submission. That's what it
Oh,
was.
I thought I heard you say there was nothing since November. So
No.
I thought I was in the wrong case.
Oh, the last submission prior to this
okay.
one, I'm sorry. And
Thanks.
now I'm talking about this submission where the only
Okay.
argument, the only thing they submitted was an argument that you should still be allowed to have a 20-foot rear yard because there are other smaller rear yards on the block, but we were looking at the rear yards right around, and we commented that it's got an existing 24-foot rear yard, and the immediate neighbor also has something like that, and so this would impose greatly. And then also, we talked about the massing of the roof, which is very high and lifted, was much higher than the neighbors. So, but I understand sort of, having been an applicant myself, and how you sometimes try to work the system. We had 4 adjournments on this application, and at our comments at the last hearing in April, we said we'd take this off the calendar. So in an effort to have this not taken off the calendar, there was this hasty submission made. So that's not an earnest attempt to resolve open issues, which were raised 5 months ago. So it's not our doing, it's the applicant who's been waiting on this for 5 months. So I'd say I don't appreciate getting these kind of not even half-hearted attempts, kind of low-hearted attempts. So I go back to my last statement that I would like to take this off the calendar. The architect and the client can go work out the answers that are responsive to our comments and then come back. So no more games. Anybody else?
Well, just that I had, in response to looking at the mass of the building and talking about the height and the roof line, I had asked that they take a look at the double height space in the bedroom. And they still talk about having a double height space in the bedroom, but they gave us have a section that does not include that anymore. So it sort of gave one the idea that perhaps they took out this double height bedroom, but I don't think that they did. And I think if they take a look at that height and try to bring that down in the back, that might reduce the perception of the building being so, so tall and so big.
I just say that all they have to do really is listen to the review session. They actually listen to the review session again. It's at 1 hour, 32 seconds, so you don't have to go through a whole hour of listening. You can find it and listen to what we said and respond to that. Modify the project. Okay.
If I may, just in defense of the applicant, they did send to staff in early April a draft submission and asked for us to review it. We looked at it and then we said, why don't you just submit this so that the board can actually, have this discussion? And I, will urge them to have the architect come to the
Right.
hearing. I think that would be useful.
But, this kind of pushback on our comments doesn't do anybody any good. It just drags this out indefinitely. Our comments are actually based on analysis, so they should respond in the application, in the drawings.
Okay.
Okay.
New cases, zoning calendar, new cases. Item number 1, 27014BZ, 203 East 92nd Street, Manhattan. It's a PCE.
Okay, so a PCE, this is an Equinox, not a CrossFit, happily. So it's located on a little bit on the cellar, but not noisy stuff, and just the lobby reception on the first floor. And then there's the 5th and 6th floor, which has the actual activity rooms. There's a school below on the 5th floor, so that's kind of an uh-oh. And on the 7th floor above this second level of the gym, there's mechanical floor, so that works well as a buffer. But they do state in the drawings that the strength areas, group fitness, and cycling will be on jack slab floating floors. I don't actually know what that is. I'm assuming Commissioner Montanez does. But I would say that we need details and the locations of these floating floors. I think that the drawings have a key on them, which wasn't legible on the plans that I got. but it seems as if there's shaded areas that might indicate that's the area of the jack slab. That just needs to be clarified, but I don't know what the jack slab is, so a detail would be helpful. Also, they go into a lot of conversation about noise, but actually noise doesn't seem to be our principal concern. It's vibration, particularly with respect to the school below. The spin studio, which seems to be the noisy thing, I know that a lot of those, like Flywheel and Soul Cycle, actually are built boxes within boxes because they're so noisy, there's so much vibration. So we do need to make sure that the spin studio is isolated. And in terms of a bar studio, I don't know whether that's really that noisy.
No. Make very little noise.
Very little noise, and yeah, unless you
some
knock the
that goes
bars
on, but
over. Clang. Okay, anybody else on this?
Oh, on looking at the 7th floor plan, I saw 2 mechanical rooms, but it wasn't clear to me that there were no dwelling units on the 7th floor. And I wanted to know if they can give any reasons why the community board disapproved this.
Okay.
Because it seemed that they, at least, it seemed that they were sort of in favor of sort of the building and the school that was going in there.
But I mean,
That
you
it was
know, a lot
unclear
of
as to
community
why they
boards
would just-
now are used to PCEs and,
Yeah, why would I?
yeah, why did they reject this PCE?
And the board resolution didn't say?
No.
No, it's,
No, there've
I
been
think it
some
has to do with
articles,
the
though,
mixed
that-
uses in the building.
Well, I mean, maybe they can tell us why. I didn't see it in the resolution.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
That's it.
this concludes the May 18th, 2015 public review session for the Board of Standards and Appeals. Mic's off.
They usually have a very, this is Board 8, right? They usually very